I guess I'll do it. So we have the Easter performance coming up next Sunday, and there's free tickets in the lobby for the 9 and 11 a.m. service. It'll be a full vocal production, visually beautiful, and probably life-altering and calling in spring with this beautiful message that we're going to share. We're going to do a metaphysical experience of the death and the resurrection of Christ in the most incredible way through our own human experience and what we're all experiencing in our own death as we're resurrecting through all that we're experiencing in this world right now. We have Good Friday service at 7, and there will be a nice talk by Jack. And then, hi, welcome.
Well,
Thanks for joining us.
I got here as fast as I could.
Okay. Anyway, Good Friday will be soloists and a beautiful evening, and it's the only service of the year where we take communion. And it's some people's they feel it's the most holy service that we hold.
Did you leave anything
Easter,
out for
Good
me?
Friday, I don't think so. Okay.
I got all dressed up for nothing.
We haven't done the first service in a long time. It's been a meditation for a very long time, so we're going to get started. Here we go. And we want you to sing with us. This is all about praising Spirit and calling that wonderful energy into our beings. So join us once you understand the song. I'm sure you've all heard it before.
Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, come and praise him, come and praise him, and give a joyful shout. Give a shout unto the Lord. Come and praise him before the rocks cry out. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord and praise him. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, come and praise him, and give a joyful shout, give a shout unto the Lord. Come and praise him, before the rocks cry out. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, and praise him. Hosanna. Hosanna. Come on, everyone, stand up. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, 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 blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna to the Lord.
Talk by Jack.
Good morning, everyone. I wasn't always a minister. So I'll tell you a true story about my my early adulthood. I hung around for a while with actors and writers, musicians in New York City. I actually had a couple of roommates, and one of them was writing a couple of skits with me for theater, and we would go down to 42nd Street in New York City to just get some insight into the underbelly of creation, because at that time 42nd Street wasn't what it is today. Today it's got really Broadway theaters, right off Broadway theaters there, but at the time I'm speaking of, there were just a number of really sleazy movie houses, and the entire street was just for the lowlife of New York City. And after we'd had, a few too many beers, my roommate and I would go to one of those theaters. At 11 o'clock, they would charge 25 cents to get in. And they'd close the place up at about 4 or 5 in the morning. But a lot of the people that had no place to go, homeless people, and lots of the drug addicts and things like that, would go into these theaters for 25 cents and sleep. Some of them would sleep, but many of them would carry on an entire response to the movie playing. There would be these comments coming out of the audience all the time regarding the characters in the movie. And because they actually were at a place where they believed these characters, and these really, most of them were very bad films, B films, old films. But the commentary was hilarious, because they would take it seriously, like when there was like a love triangle going on. There would be this dialogue that's going back and forth across this terrible theater about who's going to win her and why he is, because he's got the money. No, the other guy's got, he's got the looks. And then there'd be, certain negative slurs that I can't share with you right now about what was going on. But it was really fun and funny to be there. Today, I'm going to use that illustration at the conclusion of this talk. You can think about it while I'm talking, but if you were born and raised in a movie theater, and you just believed everything that was being shown on the screen, you could come to believe yourself to be one of the characters in that movie theater. Until sometime, somehow, someone may have interrupted your movie or your movie watching and let you in on the fact that you could leave the movie theater, you could step outside into the sunlight, and you could experience life completely differently than you do in the world. So I'm going to pick up on that when I get through with this explanation about Palm Sunday. Churches all over the world are celebrating, commemorating the triumphant entry of Jesus into that holy city, Jerusalem. And it's interesting that they would be celebrating, commemorating, because it was the last day of his life, physically speaking, and was the time of the Last Supper. He sent his disciples to set up the Passover Last Supper. And the significance of that event is something we will have to look into it from a metaphysical point of view. When I talk about metaphysical, it means beyond time-space, so that we have to really, to understand the scripture, being written by someone who's in a higher dimension and seeking to help people understand their reality, we have to collapse time and space. You'll be doing yourself an amazing enlightenment if you are willing to look at everything that Jesus does and says from a more cosmic perspective, that this is the universal Christ consciousness. This is the intelligence of God that doesn't speak on simply personality levels. It actually speaks only on a universal level. And anyone who enters the universal level realizes that this Christ consciousness is revealing to that one this truth that transcends the limited thinking, fears, concerns, and consternations of the world that human beings live in. You see, it's natural for us to want to have peace on earth and goodwill to all men and to all people, but that can never, ever happen. Ever. By changing the conditions, circumstances outside of oneself. There is another dimension in which that divine consciousness actually prevails. But to enter it and sustain it requires a shift in the way we experience reality. So, Palm Sunday, if you look at it from a cosmic, metaphysical perspective, you know, Jesus comes into Jerusalem riding on actually a colt of a donkey, a small donkey. And they throw palm leaves down on the ground. And he goes into the temple immediately, and he drives the money changers out of the temple. And he shouts at them, "You shall not make my Father's house a house of trade. This is a house of prayer." All right. It's an amazing thing historically. It's the one thing people remember about Jesus and what he did, because they say, well, even Jesus got mad. You can leave that behind if you want. It's talking about humanity is the temple of God. And it has become a house of trade, a marketing house. The mind has become so involved in marketing the well-being of the physical life in the world that it has no relationship whatsoever to its own divine Christ consciousness. But now the Christ consciousness comes in and drives out the money changers. Just from a historic perspective, the money changers were those characters that were there in the outer court. And they sold doves and sheep and lambs and oxen. They sold it to the people who were coming in on that very holy day they needed a sacrifice to make to God. Actually, the sacrifices all went to the priests. But what they would do is that they would bring in a sacrifice, the priests would take it over. But if they came, and they came from all over the world at that time, the small world, and they didn't have something to sacrifice, they would buy it from these people that were in this outer court. And they would have to also change their money to the money that was acceptable at that time. But all of that was just a lot of business and trade going on. From a historic perspective, it's okay for us to think about that because it is a satire. The writer is satirizing the mind of man caught in the illusion of his separation and believing himself and identifying himself as strictly a physical being on a physical world. He's satirizing it. Maybe it never happened. I know that'll scare some of you. Maybe it never happened. But that's the divine truth coming through. So you see how it really had become distorted if you look at it a certain way. Animal sacrifice, it just seems weird to us, but it's not weird at all. The whole object of that sacrifice is relating to the idea of fasting so that man's physical nature will not be the important element on that particular holy experience. You fast, and the body, the animal life of the body, is surrendered. That is the real sacrifice. The rest of that is simply satirical stuff put in there for us to try to understand who we are, really. And so the Christ consciousness, if you open up to it, you know, actually, in the historic perspective, makes a whip and whips the money changers out of there. My Father's house is a house of prayer. And because human beings in the unenlightened state do not know that, they do not know how to pray. And they do not know how to enter into that divine experience and consciousness that is referred to as God. For most of the people in the unenlightened state, God is somewhere else, beyond the stars, in the sky. Maybe we'll get there when we drop the body and move on, if we were good enough to be accepted. So we begin to see that possibly everything you read, especially in the New Testament, is not about one's personality life. It's about divine life. It's about transcending the initial life, the personality life that we were born and raised in. We all collected the beliefs that the world shared with us. But really, when you get right down to it, we simply incarnated into the accepted hallucination of humanity. And we're going to find life, and we're going to find it abundantly. We're going to have to transcend that state of consciousness. And we're held there, by the way, by the collective thinking of the world. It's not easy to transcend when the collective consciousness is that. So it means you have to do a spiritual practice in order to shift your attention, which is forever being sought after by the money changers. The money changers of the world, they thrive on the whole idea that money is God. And they'll sell you anything, anytime. You don't have an out because you don't know that you are divine in origin. That will never change. But you are called to become divine in expression so that you can transcend the limited thinking of the world and the definition of life that you were born, raised, and educated in, because it is flawed. You can't find happiness, you can't find peace. You'll never find true health. You'll never find true love, operating from that strictly illusionary idea of life. And so the masters down through the ages had to take to task their own awareness, and they're calling us to take to task our own awareness, which means, what does that mean? Take to task our own awareness. Everybody's going out for beers tonight. Oh, they're all going to the movies. Oh, we're all going down on this, spring break. We're going to go down and celebrate for a week down in the Bahamas. And so, but wait. I'm not going to go. I'm really supposed to sit and be still and quiet for a while. I don't want to be drawn away, because this is true. This is absolutely true. Can we have this first PowerPoint, please? You can read this in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verses 31 to 33. At that very hour, the Pharisees came, the hypocrites within us, the Pharisees or the hypocrites within us came and said to him, the master of life, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." Herod, by the way, represents the illusionary, ego-centered self. Herod will kill you. And the master of life says, "Go and tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I finish my course. Nevertheless, I must go on my way today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet, a God-serving person, should perish away from Jerusalem." Can we take this back again, please? "Go and tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow through those human beings that have taken to task their own awareness and decided that it really was their consciousness is a house of prayer, a house of quiet stillness, awareness, insight, peace, and true magnificence." And this is what is taking place as I enter the house of humanity. "So I'm not finished yet," he says. "And on the third day I finish my course. Nevertheless, I go my way today, tomorrow, and the day following. For it cannot be that a prophet should perish away from Jerusalem." What does that mean? Cannot be that a prophet should perish away from Jerusalem. Why is this master writer, who's satirizing the human condition in order to get us to look at ourselves, why does he write that? Because of this next PowerPoint. Can we have it up, please? Jerusalem means habitation of peace. And if you're looking at the scripture and you really were involved with them, you know that Paul, the apostle, said, there are two Jerusalems. There's the physical Jerusalem, Paul will say, that's in bondage with all of the children who are part of it. But the Jerusalem above is free. Here's what he says. This is in the Bible. This Jerusalem above is the mother of us all. Wow. So how is it that a prophet cannot perish outside of Jerusalem? Cannot perish outside of the consciousness of peace, the wisdom and enlightenment of God awareness. Cannot perish outside of that. Not a true prophet, not a true seeker. Cannot happen that way. Every true seeker will find his or her way into the consciousness of God, into the habitation of divine peace. And it is the only place that human beings will find peace, true peace, lasting peace. It'll never happen in the convoluted, limited consciousness of humanity. So we're talking about peace of mind or inner peace, mystical peace. This mystical peace, by the way, is the measure of one's spirituality. To the degree that you have practiced spiritually, that you can have this state of peace, where would it come from? Try to find your way into this. A mystical state of peace is what? A state of peace in someone who is able to look beyond the foibles, the limitations, the conflicts, the nastiness, the disease of the world, is able to look beyond it, even though he may still be in the world or she's in the world, but no longer of the world, living in the consciousness of the majesty of the presence of the only real intelligence, capable of looking beyond the foibles of humanity, knowing with compassion they are screwed. And so, we don't, the day of the prophets is past. Anyone can enter because the revelation is now everywhere. Can we have this next PowerPoint, please? You can read this in the Old Course in Miracles text 206 or in the new edition 222. Salvation is for the mind, and it is attained through peace. This is the only thing that can be saved and the only way to save it. Any response other than love means you're unenlightened and arises from a confusion about the what and the how of salvation. And this is the only answer. Never lose sight of this, and never allow yourself to believe, even for an instant, that there is another answer. For you will surely place yourself among the impoverished who do not understand that they dwell in abundance and that salvation is come. Can we take this back again, please? Salvation is for the mind, and it is attained through peace. This is the only thing that can be saved and the only way to save it. In other words, as we practice and become emissaries of peace, having the divine consciousness to bestow peace, where usually we bestow anger, we bestow fear, we bestow conflict, we bestow vengeance, we bestow war. And still in our bestowing war, on and off throughout our physical experiences, we don't even realize that we're creating every war that ever was or ever will be. So until we can get to that place where we bestow peace simply because we know peace, we are operating in the habitation of peace. We are operating in and from God consciousness. So that which from the beginning was true, that we're made in the image and likeness of God, that which gives us breath and life, we must become expressions of that in order to be truly alive, if we're going to find life, in fact. So this is not the result, by the way, entering into the consciousness divine, the enlightened awareness. This is not the result of conceptual learning. So it doesn't matter how amazing Google becomes, how vast and deep you can go on your computer or with your cell phone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. In fact, Eckhart Tolle speaks to this in a very interesting but pointed way, and you might take it with you. From his book, Stillness Speaks, do you need more knowledge in order to be happy and finally awake? Is more information going to save the world, or faster computers, more scientific or intellectual analysis? Is it not wisdom that humanity seeks most at this time? But what is wisdom, and where is it to be found? Wisdom comes with the ability to be still. Just look and just listen. No more is needed. Being still, looking, and listening activates the non-conceptual intelligence within you. Let stillness direct the words and actions of your life. In essence, what he is saying is, while we have made the human intellect and all that it has been able to collect and amass and create with technology and computers has simply been another grand distraction. Because what the world really needs now is wisdom, not knowledge. When we finally enter into that refined consciousness, that Jerusalem above, the joy and the peace and the insight will generate the love, the compassion, and the wisdom needed to be emissaries of peace. And you can check yourself out. Until you are actually an emissary of peace, you're still not quite on the path. It's good. I mean, along the way, everybody fails in an attempt to be an awakened human being in a world that is so totally in denial that we are created and we did not create ourselves. A world that is in total denial of the fact that we were created and we did not create ourselves. And it's not easy to be an emissary of peace in a world where that which is around you is filled with conflict, fear, and war. So let us now tap into this wisdom that we're talking about. Here it is, as clearly as it can be said from A Course in Miracles. You can read this in the old text, page 533, the new edition, 575. In quietness, oh my goodness, where did that word come from? In putting down and turning off your cell phones, in turning off your computers, in turning off your television, in turning off the media, are all things answered, and is every problem quietly resolved. In conflict, there can be no answer and no resolution, for its purpose is to make no resolution possible, and to ensure no answer will be plain. A problem set in conflict has no answer because conflict is all about the material world and its need to grasp, manipulate, cheat everything around it in order to try to gain some kind of step forward, higher, upper place in the world. And that conflict is seen in different ways. And what would be an answer in the world of conflict from one point of view? Can we move it on, please? Is not an answer in another light. You are in conflict. Thus it must be clear you cannot answer anything at all, for conflict has no limited effects. If God gave an answer, there must be a way in which your problems are resolved, for what he wills already has been done. Therefore, God, oh my goodness, who would write this? Therefore, God must have given you a way of putting down your cell phones and your computers and your televisions and reaching to another state of mind in which the answer is already there. Such is the holy instant. Can we take this back again, please? In quietness are all things answered, and is every problem quietly resolved. In conflict, there can be no answer. That is, in the world and the thinking of the world, there is no real resolution. For the purpose of the world is to make no resolution possible. The purpose of the world is to manipulate and find out how you can aggrandize your limited personality self and glorify and prosper your limited personality, body-oriented, body-ideal self. And that world is there to ensure that no answer from the divine will be plain. A problem set in conflict has no answer. Problem set in the land of personalities has no answer. For it is seen in different ways, and what would be an answer from one point of view is not an answer in another light. You are in conflict. Thus it must be clear you cannot answer anything at all. For conflict has no limited effects. Yet, if this divine intelligence and love which has given us life gave an answer, there must be a way in which your problems are resolved. For what he wills already has been done. Therefore, God must have given you a way of reaching to another state of mind in which the answer is already there. Such is the holy instant. Such is the moment in which the most important thing for you is peace. Such is that moment where the beauty of being able to just be at peace, totally accepting and looking beyond the foibles and limitations of everything around you, avoiding the distractions of everything around you, because the only thing you really want to be is okay. The only thing you really want to be is okay. The only thing you really want to be is present, here. Being able to be here without considering how you're going to make the future a little better, tomorrow a little bigger. It's just being here, being okay, and being here. People say you need a vacation. People say you have to go someplace. You have to go to, Mexico. People say we're going to California. We're going to have a good time. Or we're going here. We're going overseas. We're touring Europe. We're going here. We're going there. Because the necessity for living in the world is to find something still distracting enough to keep you from thinking about, listen to it, to keep you from thinking about your own self-betrayal. The masters don't have to go to California or to Mexico because their joy, their peace, their happiness, their love is wherever they are, because they're okay with knowing the presence of God. This other state of mind that A Course in Miracles refers to is transcendent. It's not contemplative. It's not contemplating the war. It's not contemplating the war in the Ukraine. It's not doing that. It's not contemplating the pandemic. It's not contemplating the limitations everywhere, the distractions, the fears and concerns. The war really is in the mind. It is a war between the definition we were created in, raised in, educated in. It's a war in the definition of being a personal body self, as opposed to being a spiritual being of universal awareness, capable of healing everything around you by virtually looking past its own sickness, looking past its dis-ease, its uneasiness. Every limitation, every concern, every conflict is a matter of dis-ease. And human beings try to grow used to living in the disease. And they do every manner of thing to try to do that. And some of them do it by trying to take dope or alcohol or everything to forget the self-betrayal. But you can't escape that illusion. It's everywhere. The money changers are everywhere. They have given up on divine consciousness. Their purpose now is to continue to sell you something, anything. And the awakening to reality is the awakening to God's omnipresent consciousness. But children of God are not omnipresent. That's the problem. People say, would God create a world like this? Where is God in all this? Why is this taking place? What's wrong with that and wrong with this? Where is God? God never can go any place other than where God always is, here and now. But the children who are living, conditioned, and robbed by the money changers, they're not present. They're not here. They're not now. They're not awake. So God is present in every moment, in every place, in every condition. But human beings who are enlightened are not. And so the world is filled with fear, violence, conflict, and vengeance, and war. But it is all a shared hallucination. Can you imagine that word hasn't really been out here a lot, even in Unity? But here's what's going to happen. To those of you that know exactly what I'm talking about because you're living in the higher Jerusalem, you have no problem with it. To those of you that are not living in the high Jerusalem yet, that word hallucination is going to help you. You're going to say, is it possible? After all these years that I've lived doing this and doing that, in the thinking of the world, is it really possible that I simply have joined the collective hallucination called humanity? And that there is a way out, but the way out is within. Is that possible? So now I want to bring you back to the 42nd Street movie. Imagine, if you will, sitting through a lot of really bad movies. Some of them weren't all negative. There were some positive movies. But imagine going through all of this in that dark, dank, sleazy theater, but having grown used to it because you were born there. You were raised in it. Your family all stared at their screen and never took their eyes off of it. And you came to believe it. And you came to react to it. And then someone shuts the projector off, steps up on the stage and says, this isn't your reality. Come with me. Step outside. You step outside. And you will step outside in those theaters at 5 o'clock in the morning because they have to clean them up to whatever degree they would, but you step outside into the rising sun. You step into a different world altogether where people are in fact, listen to it. What if you stepped into a world where your devotion was so great to being an emissary of peace that you began to recognize that you could bring peace into any conditions with people, even though they themselves weren't ordinarily peaceful, but they were very sick or diseased or angry or frustrated. But the very fact that you held this reality of peace so strongly that you can actually help them open up and be at peace in those moments that they're in your presence. Boy, stepping outside the hallucination and saying, instead of, as you have always said, where is heaven? How does one enter heaven? How does one get to heaven? And people just tell you, be good and give your tithes. Be good, do the services. Be good, do this and that. But to take to task your own awareness, to decide to become an emissary of divine peace, to know that this Christ isn't coming on some distant day unless you open up and it comes within you, the consciousness of Christ, the willingness to be a Christ-conscious being. And that's stepping outside the theater for good. And that is everything. My final remarks are these. Don't lament the homeless that you see on just about every street now today. Don't lament the new variant of the virus that the money changers are going to sell and keep selling you. As long as they can make you afraid, they will have customers. And don't lament the war in the Ukraine, because the war will always be in the world. But take a moment to realize that you may have been homeless for your entire life. You never knew your true home in the higher Jerusalem. You never knew the comforts, real comfort. You never knew the insight. You never knew the real love that you always sought in the outer-directed, illusion-driven world. So don't lament. Take a moment to consider the possibility that the day of the prophets is past. Anyone can invite and become an emissary of the divine Christ. Let's take a few moments for meditation together. Take a couple of deep breaths. As you release your breath, release whatever cares, concerns you may have been packing around with you. For these few moments, just be absolutely okay, because you are absolutely okay. Whatever dimension of mind you are entertaining, the universal intelligence has given you permission to experiment with any level of consciousness you decide. It says to you in allegory, you can eat of any of the trees in this garden of delight, but stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for you haven't got the capacity, and it is only the illusionary definition of self as an ego that separates you from the delight and the majesty of the life God has bestowed on everyone. So now we learn to breathe. Breathing in the refined consciousness of peace. It filling our awareness. Releasing the breath of healing into the world. Recognizing that just breathing is a miracle. Breathing is a prayer. Breathing is a mantra. Remembering to breathe when there is a moment of agitation. Just breathing brings awareness brings compassion, patience, forgiveness. For it is God. Just breathing is a miracle. Breathing in the refined golden light of life. Imagine it filling your body from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. Restoring harmony, healing, joy. Releasing the breath through the pores of your body. Imagine it. Releasing the light of life into the world around you. It touching everyone and everything and making it brighter. For breathing is a miracle. Breathing is a prayer. It is a mantra. Just breathing. When a moment of anxiety rises, breathing back into the awareness of the divine presence of your reality. At last feeling okay about yourself and everyone else. Feeling okay about life, knowing without a shadow of a doubt, it is a school. Ever bringing you closer to the awakening that your soul desires. Just breathing is a miracle. Remembering to breathe. Remembering to be okay. Remembering to be an emissary of divine light and peace. For the Master of Life, who is with us always, said this: "You are the light of the world. Let your light so shine that others may recognize the presence of this intelligence that is life within you and glorify that life within themselves." And so we live and move, accept, serve, and care, knowing the presence of God everywhere. And just breathing, remembering to breathe, can take us there in any moment. And to this, let us say, Amen. We will take an offering for unity now. And for those of you that are watching, tuning in online, live stream, you can make your offerings accordingly in any one of these ways. And as we bring to mind that offering, that financial gift we'd like to make to Unity of Boulder, you're making this gift to the truth of life, to be reminded of the truth of true life. And so now, let's bless it with this offering prayer. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, because I give. So it is.
Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Prepare ye the way of the Lord.
All right, well, let's all stand. We'll close with our closing song. I release and I let go. And I know we all need to sing that and release it and feel great for the week. And here we go.
I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggles, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. Yes, I'm only here for God. Yes, I'm only here for God.
Beautiful singing. Yes. Have a beautiful week. Grab your tickets for the Easter production next Sunday, 9 and 11.
Do we have prayer partners?
We don't for the
Not
first
this
service
morning,
today.
okay. All right. We do have refreshments in Fellowship Hall. You can go over there, have refreshments, and hang out and talk to everybody who's around you, and then you can come back for the second service. I left out one of the PowerPoints, and it's really the most important one.
Finland yet.